but the jury wanted to remind folks about that. But first thing, yes, they sent a note to the judge asking him to make sure that people in the gallery, as well as the general public, understand, for those who may know who they are, that they are not to publicize or release their identities in any way. Now, after that, court got the business, and a lot of the business today had to do with admitting items into evidence. The bulk of those items were guns. Blair Sable joining us now live to tell us more about exactly what was admitted into evidence today. Blair?
Well, and several of the family-owned guns that were at the Moselle property were some of the evidence, actually a highlight of evidence submitted to the jury for their consideration today, including one that is the same type of weapon that law enforcement have determined to have been the cause of Maggie Murdaugh's death. Now, we also spent much of the afternoon listening to new evidence, the second interview between Alex Murdaugh and law enforcement. This interview, it takes place a couple of days after the murders, and Murdaugh is asked about three 300 blackout rifles that he bought from a DNR officer who also owns a gun business, John Beddington. Now, according to testimony today, Beddington built each one, and Murdaugh had bought both of his sons their very own, though he could only locate one of them, and said Paul's was missing, but he never reported it stolen.
It wasn't officially reported because I wasn't totally convinced it was stolen. Okay. You know,
Well, Murdaugh says that while guns were not necessarily kept at the kennels, there were always guns around. And the defense has objected several times today to the submittal of these guns, stating that they weren't relevant at all to the case. But the court and the judge ultimately sided with the state, saying that it was more probative than prejudicial. But the state at this point has not said that any of these weapons that have been submitted as evidence were necessarily the murder weapon.
And that was definitely one of the concerns of the defense today. They were like, we don't know about all of these guns, and are any of these guns the actual weapon? So they raised that concern. Now, Cameron Bopp is inside of the courtroom for us during the trial. He's there to see the reaction both from Alex Murdaugh as well as the jury as that evidence is being admitted in. So, Cameron, what was the response when that happened today?
Well, and in reference to those guns and the objections from the defense, lead prosecutor Creighton Waters snapped back, saying those guns are relevant in the investigation. Now, that was a powerful punch to the defense, and that's when I caught one of the jurors smirking just a little bit. Now, in reference to that new evidence presented today, that interview with investigators, that seemed to elicit an emotion in Murdaugh. It seemed to bring him back to that very day, June 10th, when that interview took place. Now, in that video, Murdaugh recounted the day and his interactions with his wife and son on June 7th, and how he went shooting around the property with Paul earlier in the day. He spoke fondly of his son, calling him irresponsible, but said that he cared for him so much. Now, as he started to cry in that recorded interview, talking about Paul, he appeared to cry in the courtroom. Take a listen.
he was ADHD. He was bad about jumping from, and he had so many wonderful qualities now, but he was bad about jumping from. He'd start this, maybe not quite finish it, move, do something else, and you know, you'll find out from his friends he had clothes strung out all over the state. He did that with clothes, he did that with guns, he did that with my boats.
And just after he started to cry in court, so did his brother, John Marvin, who was in the gallery today sitting next to Buster Murdaugh, Alex's surviving son. Murdaugh quickly pulled himself together, though, and he went back to that blank stare that we've seen mostly through this trial so far. Minutes later in that interview, Agent Owens asked Murdaugh about his relationship with his wife, to which he said it was as good as can be. Now, as he listened to that part of the interview, he started to cry again. He put his head down and he pulled himself together again. Now, we can imagine this is only the beginning of an emotional few weeks for Murdaugh, with nearly 200 potential witnesses being called forward, and surely much more evidence to be presented to the court. For now, I'll send it back to you, Ann.
All right, Cameron, thank you very much. Now, when court reconvenes tomorrow, we start exactly where we left off today. SLED agent Jeff Croft will be back on the stand tomorrow for cross-examination by the defense and possible redirect by the state. Reporting live in Colleton County, Ann McGill.